courses as well. And we're just really delighted that he's been able to do this. He's going to present some material for us. We'll have some time at the end for questions, and Josh will have the answers, I know. But anyway, not to put any pressure on him, but we're just really thankful he was willing to do this for us. So Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll let you have the rest of the session.
I'd ask everyone to mute, please.
Mm-hmm. I think you need to give me permission to screen share, Jim. There we go. All right, can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. This happened organically. We were in an organizational management department meeting with Jim and Connie, and the topic, of course, of ChatGPT came up, and they asked me about it because I also have a computer science background, and the department shares me with the BSIT department as well from time to time, and I teach computer science courses over there. So of course I was happy to share, and I ended up demoing ChatGPT to the department and showing them some of the things that can be done with it. And Jim asked if I would then share this beyond just our small BAOM team, and I was happy to do so. So this presentation is a result of that conversation. So I just want to thank Jim and Connie for giving me the opportunity to share, and I hope that it is meaningful to all of you who are on this evening. So the title of my presentation is "The Future is Now, Prepare Yesterday." And it's a clever title, but I really mean it. We are in the midst of, I think, a major shift in terms of the world economy and the way technology is going to affect our lives, perhaps in a more disruptive sense than even the emergence of the internet itself. And so we cannot be caught unaware. And I think for all of us, especially those of us in online higher education, must be prepared to face this challenge head on. And I think we can do it in a constructive way. And hence the subtitle, Constructively Integrating Generative AI in Organizational Management Studies. And obviously this doesn't have to apply only to organizational management, but that happens to be Jim's department. And so that's how I tailored the presentation. So just a couple of goals for this session. I want to look at the prevalence of AI in business and industry and how it's disrupting things there. I also want to take some time to do some reflection tonight and think about truly the human aspects of what we do as online educators, and maybe even look critically at ourselves in terms of how we might be complicit in dehumanizing the process. I'd like to look at some creative and constructive approaches to incorporating AI into our courses, if not ourselves as instructors, I hope down the road in course revisions. And then I'd like to reflect on opportunities to re-examine some of our own assumptions about online teaching and learning. So what is ChatGPT? Well, it is a generative AI large language model, LLM, designed to generate human-like responses to natural language queries and conversations. And there's a whole subfield of computer science and artificial intelligence and machine learning called natural language processing. So I did a graduate certificate in machine learning at UC Riverside, and it's an area I dabble in. I'm not doing it professionally, but I do enjoy tinkering and doing some coding. And what's interesting is that the algorithm that brought about ChatGPT was really a breakthrough, an intellectual breakthrough, but not terribly complicated. Sophisticated, yes, but not terribly complicated. in a published paper from 2014. And OpenAI, among others, have been working with that algorithm and training the model over the past several years. And of course, when it was released, it was like a bomb went off in business and industry, and certainly in online higher education. But the model itself is not terribly sophisticated. In fact, there are folks on YouTube that you find a tutorial that says write your own ChatGPT client in under an hour in Python code, for example. So it can be done. But what is unique about this model is that they trained it on virtually the entire internet. And so that's effectively what makes it quote unquote intelligent. I have strong feelings personally about artificial intelligence and the limits of it. Philosophically speaking, I don't believe that we will ever achieve what's called general artificial intelligence. So machines simply will not be able to think, not the same way that human beings do. We like to fantasize about that in a science fiction sense, but practically in terms of the technology, I just don't see that it's possible. The complexities of the human brain are still extraordinary. There's still mysteries in cognitive neuroscience about the nature of the mind itself. No matter how sophisticated these models become, I don't think that we will see them take on human qualities, human-like qualities, perhaps mimicking human thought, but never fully becoming sentient themselves. So here are a couple of headlines that have caught my eye over the past several weeks since ChatGPT took the world by storm. Microsoft's chief scientific officer said we should question the idea that we should put a 6-month pause on AI at all, just to stop and think about the ethical concerns. Effectively, the genie is out of the bottle, and it's essentially too late to even do that. People are now using it and using it at a rapid pace in terms of increasing productivity in daily white-collar work. IBM's CEO recently said, this was just from a few days ago, said that he expects AI to be so good at back office work that he plans to pause hiring humans for those jobs. So we have big questions about what work will look like in the future, especially those of us who are training, preparing professionals in higher education. Here's another one. A CEO is spending more than $2,000 a month on ChatGPT Plus accounts for all of his employees and said he's saving hours of time. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, in my opinion. Here's another one. The godfather of AI just quit Google and says he regrets his life's work because it can be hard to stop bad actors from using it for bad things. Well, certainly that's true, but the same has been true of the internet and virtually every other technology that human beings have engineered. Here's another one. CEOs are getting closer to finally saying it. AI will wipe out more jobs than they can count. So someone just before we got on this meeting said that there's a mix of emotions of excitement, of intrigue, of marvel, but also of terror and fear and uncertainty. And I think all of those emotions are accurate in terms of describing what's happening in the moment that we are living in. But at the end of the day, this is my conviction that successful managers and leaders, and in our department, that's what we're training people to do, preparing people to do for their careers, will have to know how to use generative AI to improve productivity and profitability. It is going to be a requirement of the job to know how to use these tools just as much as productivity tools of yesteryear. A book that has affected me, in fact, I used it in my first dissertation back in 2007, was Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. Toffler was a futurist and described human history in terms of three waves. An agrarian wave where agriculture radically changed our hunter-gatherer approach to human society. Then the industrial age, where mass production radically changed agrarian life. And then Toffler was actually predicting the information age in the 70s, that the information age and new white-collar work, service industries would disrupt the old industrial ways of life. And they did. But now we're perhaps in a fourth wave, where it's not just information, it's intelligence. It's artificial intelligence, I think, is going to disrupt the economy in the same way that industry and agriculture and the internet itself disrupted human society and economies in the past. If you haven't heard this term, 4IR refers to the fourth industrial revolution as kind of a peak that developed economies will reach in terms of moving into a service economy and reaching peak productivity. And certainly these tools like generative AI are going to take us there faster than we ever dreamed possible. But with that said, I want to share a quote from John Steinbeck's book, East of Eden. And this is the philosopher and the humanities person in me coming out. Steinbeck was writing at the turn of the 20th century, and the Industrial Revolution had changed society in America, certainly, but also in Europe. And the world was changing. There was now steam locomotives and telegraph wires all across the countryside, and mass production of automobiles was beginning to change things that people took for granted. And this is what Steinbeck said. I think there are no truer words spoken. Steinbeck has an incredible way of getting to the heart of the human experience. This was more than 100 years ago, but let's apply it to what we're experiencing now with this AI revolution. He says, "I don't know how it will be in the years to come. There are monstrous changes taking place in the world, forces shaping a future whose face we do not know. Some of these forces seem evil to us, perhaps not in themselves, but because their tendency is to eliminate other things we hold good. At such a time, it seems natural and good to me to ask myself these questions. What do I believe in? What must I fight for? And what must I fight against?" And so at any time of upheaval, social upheaval and radical change, I think he's right. These are the questions we have to ask ourselves when we face these new challenges head on. But I want us to consider this, especially those of us in the Forbes School of Business and Technology. We no longer expect our accounting students to turn in paper ledgers. We recognize that it's not a practical skill anymore. VisiCalc was the first really successful commercial electronic spreadsheet. And in the early days of personal computing, a lot of business people thought that it was just a toy and that would never catch on. And yet today we can't live without Microsoft Excel, and we teach it, and we expect our students in our courses to have competence in using spreadsheet software. We don't teach manual typing anymore. We don't expect them to know how to load ribbon into a typewriter or how to fix the hammering keys. It's just not practical. The first spell checker was released by Digital Equipment Corporation on the PDP-10 mainframe in 1971. Was it cheating to use a spell checker? I bet you there was a lot of people who in academia who were questioning the use of an electronic spell checker in 1971. And yet today, we encourage our students to use software like Microsoft Word, which has built-in on-the-fly grammar checking now and spell checking, but also plugins like Grammarly that will completely restructure sentences and correct grammar for our students. Is it cheating to use Grammarly? Most of us would say no. We want our students to learn how to use it because it's a powerful tool that's going to enhance their ability to communicate in writing. And so let's reflect on these kinds of technological advances that maybe at one time people questioned, and especially in the university setting. And now we take them for granted. I think about writing a dissertation, a doctoral dissertation. You know, there was a time when people wrote their dissertations with a typewriter, and they had to make sure that every citation was correct and have all their sources on index cards and use the Dewey Decimal System to look up sources in the library. It's all gone. And doctoral students and scholars in all of our fields, we use electronic databases, and we search and we plug DOIs in and we generate our references that way. Certainly it's much easier and we're more productive. And so it doesn't make sense to go back to clickety-clacking our dissertations or our scholarly research on a manual typewriter. So where are we today in terms of the development of something as powerful as generative AI? Here's another headline that I saw just recently. In fact, I ended up doing a post myself on LinkedIn about this. This is from Inside Higher Ed, and it was an opinion piece saying, yes, we are in a ChatGPT crisis, and it's time we start acting like it, speaking of higher education. And so, as you all know, even within the last few weeks, Turnitin released a new tool within its own plagiarism checking software. It's, in addition to its similarity score, there's now an AI generation score that tries to predict how much of a paper was generated or written by AI. I think it's helpful, but I also think that it was a reaction out of panic that was happening in particular online higher education, where we've become accustomed to students writing essays, posting discussions, we grade them, they pass courses. So I really believe, and this may not be a popular opinion, but I think, yeah, we are in a crisis in online higher education, but it's a crisis of our own making. At one point, online education was cutting edge and innovative. And I think in the last few decades, as it became more mainstream, we settled into complacency of thinking that just a weekly discussion, a weekly multiple choice quiz, a couple of papers were sufficient to assess student learning. And we settled into that pattern. And it, in my opinion, got us to this place. And so when something as powerful as ChatGPT was released, it caught us by surprise, and we were not prepared for it. So the Turnitin enhancement was just a reaction to this radical shift in productivity, and we're all scrambling in our field to respond to it. So this was a post I actually did on LinkedIn, and I got a little bit of traction on this, quite a bit of conversation generated from it. And this was my statement about this article. ChatGPT is now writing college essays, and higher ed has a big problem. I say it's time for us to take a hard look in the mirror and rethink the online higher education assembly line model. Essays and discussions in, feedback and grades out, instead of circling our wagons for fear of the motor car. Who's with me? And I really believe that. I think that we are fooling ourselves if we think we can fight this. We cannot put the genie back in the bottle, as I said. Generative AI is here to stay. I don't know if any of you saw the episode of South Park recently that featured ChatGPT. Now, I'm not endorsing South Park's morality, but I do think that they got to the core of the issue and it was an indictment on education. So in short, the kids figure out how to use ChatGPT to write their essays. Mr. Garrison, the teacher, is supremely impressed with the quality of essays they've been turning in. Then they find out that it was AI generated. Everybody panics. They bring in someone to enforce the old ways. It's kind of like an old conjurer that comes into the school. And then in the end, the teacher, Mr. Garrison, figures out that he can grade their essays using ChatGPT, and he doesn't have to read them anymore. And so then he becomes the biggest defender of it. And in the end, the episode concludes with as much ambiguity as I think we're all feeling. Everyone is torn on what to do with this thing and how it's going to affect all of us, and in particular, how it's going to affect teaching and learning. So at Microsoft, Eric Horvitz believes that more investment in understanding, guiding, and regulating AI is needed to address concerns and ensure that this technology is used responsibly. I think in principle, I agree with him. Responsible use is probably the only path forward for us. This is what I think one of the most powerful quotes, is that while large language AI models like ChatGPT demonstrate impressive linguistic skill, they still make strange mistakes when it comes to understanding social relationships, the physical world, and how people think. In the end, it cannot do the work that only human beings can do. Those of us at UAGC probably saw this infographic that was released from the college administration recently, and we've posted announcements to our courses with guidance to our students about what they can and can't do with AI. And I think this is actually a pretty helpful T-chart in terms of explaining responsible versus irresponsible uses of the technology. So it's a good start, and I applaud UAGC for being so proactive on this issue. It wasn't just a total ban. It was how can you use this responsibly within the courses. But I want to make a few things clear, technologically speaking. So first of all, generative AI is nothing more than predictive text on a massive scale. So you know how on your phone, it starts to learn what words should follow other words based on your patterns of typing and texting. This is really just the same thing. It's a bit more sophisticated than that under the hood, but in the end, that's all it is. It's just predicting, and it's actually not even predicting words, it's predicting characters that should follow other characters based on probabilities. That's really all that's happening under the hood. So it's not really that smart. It's just trained on certain patterns, and it's a gigantic pool of predictive text. So if you've played with it, you know that generative AI will make up facts, sources, and quotes. It cannot discriminate truth from lies or fact from fiction, because all it's doing is saying what character should follow the last one based on probability. So it doesn't know what's true. It doesn't know what's false. It doesn't know how to verify anything. And if you ask it to find academic sources for you, it will just make them up. And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, the sources it creates in the reference list don't even exist anywhere in reality. The authors' names are usually accurate. They'll cite seminal authors, but the sources themselves just simply don't exist. The DOIs don't even exist. So in terms of blatant abuse of this within our courses, it should be pretty easy to spot if we take the time to do it. Turn it in aside. And generative AI depends on the knowledge it was trained on, or the information, the data it was trained on. So garbage in, garbage out. And there's a lot of garbage on the internet, which was used to train the model. So, and there's a lot of garbage in human knowledge, in the human knowledge pool. So we created this monster, and everything that it has learned from us. So when we get garbage out, we really have no one to blame but ourselves, because it was our collective knowledge that it was trained on. So while it's a powerful tool, and it is a very powerful tool, I want to make it really clear that it's no more powerful or no more intelligent than a spreadsheet's formulas with accurate or inaccurate sales data. So if we put the wrong data into a spreadsheet, doesn't matter how sophisticated our formulas are in Excel, if we put the wrong figures in, it's going to compute the wrong results. And the same is true here. It's only as smart as what it's been trained on or fed on. So I want to talk about some constructive ways that this can be used within our courses. And I know we can't make course revisions right now, but these are just ideas to start sparking some creative thinking along these lines. So my view is that down the road, we need to embrace this and let students use it, because I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they're using it already. And I've already seen, I've worked with it enough that I can actually spot the cadence of the language. There's certain ways that it writes. There are certain words that it tends to use, like overall and additionally, that you can start to spot when something has been AI generated. But students are using it, they're figuring it out, and eventually we have to find ways to use it constructively in our courses. So here's a couple of ideas that I came up with. And these are relevant to our organizational management classes. So use ChatGPT to brainstorm a strategic planning process for your organization, business, or future business goal. Then critique the outline and use it to formulate a presentation for a strategic planning retreat. So what we're saying is, go ahead, use the tool, use it as a thought partner, use it for stimulating creativity to give you some ideas, but critique the output. We want that to be part of the process of developing this strategic planning presentation. Another assignment idea might be to ask ChatGPT to compose an email to an employee, notifying them that they will be placed on a performance improvement plan. Then, with track changes on, and copy and paste that into a Word document, we want them to critique or enhance the language of the AI generated email. And get this, to do something that is uniquely human, to improve it with more empathy and emotional intelligence, because the machine has none. Then we want them to justify their edits, maybe in a 500-word reflection on what AI can and cannot accomplish when delivering emotionally charged news to employees. Because I promise you, when they get into industry, or most of our students are working professionals already, they're using it, and they're using it for this purpose. So we might as well help them navigate some of the challenges of using it for practical purposes in everyday business. So here's a couple of discussion forum ideas. So using ChatGPT, paraphrase a portion of a peer-reviewed article on Kotter's eight-step organizational change model. Then identify at least one fact from the article that the engine, ChatGPT, distorted or misrepresented, and propose an alternative framing based on your own reading. So what we're asking them to do is to compare what the AI model generated versus their interpretation of the original source. And that's a constructive exercise, because the AI generated text is going to get a few things wrong. Here's another discussion idea. Use ChatGPT to write an equal opportunity policy for your company or organization's HR department, and be sure it's contextualized to your organization's size, purpose, and location. Then compare the output to federal guidelines and write your own critique of how well the AI-generated policy conforms to federal law and how well it accurately captured the unique needs of your organization. I think one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to embrace a lot more reflection, a lot more personal application. We wanted everything in third person in formal education. We wanted everything cited and essentially synthesizing theory. But I think we're going to have to move now in this new world of AI. We're going to have to move to a whole lot more internalization and reflection, and allow students to speak with their own voice, because that's what they can do that AI cannot. So
Can
in
I
this
ask you a
case,
question, Josh?
sure.
So is your point of reference ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0?
Well, I'm a pro subscriber, so technically it is 4.0. However, for example, image prompts are not yet released to the public, so I haven't got a chance to use any of that yet. But
Okay, all right. I was just curious. And then secondly, on like the second discussion idea, are you saying, so use ChatGPT for the first part and then use Google for the second part? Or where would they find that information for the second part that's different from what ChatGPT 4.0 might have embedded in it?
Yeah, so we probably direct them, straight to the Department of Labor website, which states the federal law explicitly, and ask them to interpret it, interpret the primary source themselves. Maybe, a mainstream HR management handbook, for example.
So, all right, so not to play devil's advocate or anything,
Sure.
but couldn't you just ask the the AI to do that?
You could, but it's not going to generate precisely the same results, because it's going to generate text, but not necessarily word for word from
Okay.
the federal law itself. So remember, these large language models are not search engines. They're meant to be conversational. So it's not just pulling information from the internet. In fact, some of the original model, the ChatGPT or the GPT 3.5, was trained on essentially an archive of the internet prior to 2019. So it's not going out and fetching things in real time per se, if that makes sense.
All right, thanks.
So these are just some ideas that I'm throwing out there of how we might constructively use this to help students compare what they're getting out of the model to sources that we would consider legitimate, and in particular peer-reviewed sources, but also in this case, things like federal law. So a couple of other headlines in that vein. Here's one about using ChatGPT to help improve Excel skills. So maybe in some practical assignments of having them actually develop spreadsheets, finding ways to integrate ChatGPT into that. This was from an article that said, I think it was like 10 killer prompts for ChatGPT to boost your productivity. Well, here's an example. You're a customer service representative dealing with a customer upset about a late delivery. Write a 100-word apology email offering a 20% discount. And there it goes. Well, now we might ask the student to do something with that email, edit it, revise it, enhance it, contextualize it to their organization or their business. Because when they're out there in the workforce, they're going to be using it for this purpose anyway. So my conclusion is, let's use this opportunity to craft assignments that produce more empathetic, more emotionally intelligent, and more human-focused organizational managers and leaders. And I think that was Andrew speaking earlier, but the point is well taken that a lot of the grunt work of white-collar jobs, like composing emails, writing policies, documenting things, summarizing tables, the AI is going to be able to do that and do it well. And in many cases, probably do the stilted work better than a human being. But these are the skills, these are the things that only we can do. And I think we've got to begin really thinking about our courses and our assignments and our discussions to say, how can we put that uniquely human touch on them, so that the students are actually learning and doing something and not just generating assignments out of these large language models. So I want to conclude with another Steinbeck quote, and this is what he said at the end of that part of East of Eden. He said, we've got to decide what we believe in, what we're willing to fight for. He says, and this I believe, that the free exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world. And this I would fight for. I tend to agree with him. If we truly care about the work that we do as educators, then that's the only thing worth fighting for, is protecting the individual human mind and the things that humans can do that machines will never be able to do, and integrating those skills into our courses, assignments, courses, and degree programs. So here's my, pardon me?
That I have asked the AI to write poetry, and it is unbelievably poignant.
Yeah.
And better. I mean, it's there with Yeats and all the great poetries of all time. And no matter, I mean, you can just put in very simple prompts, and it will generate poetry that brings you to tears.
Yeah. Yeah. I can give a good example of how it's doing that. So there's actually a tutorial out there of building your own natural language model, similar to the GPT model. It's not necessarily interactive. That's the chat part of this, is the human computer interaction. But in the example, in the tutorial video, the author actually trains the model on the complete works of Shakespeare, and then it generates poetry in Shakespearean prose, in Elizabethan language, essentially. And it is just doing the same thing. It's looking for probabilities of which character should follow the preceding character. And because it's analyzed a large volume of human written prose, Shakespearean sonnets or whatever, it mimics it, and it mimics it surprisingly well. But remember, it's just mimicking human creativity. It's not thinking on its own. So let me wrap this up, and then we'll move into a maybe more robust Q&A. Here are my conclusions. Number one, generative AI is here to stay, and it will be an essential business tool in the future. It is not going away, and students not only need to learn to use it responsibly and constructively, but they must, in order to be successful and, I think, find gainful employment after completing our degree programs. Number two, we must decide what we're willing to fight for as educators, and that's on us. So my view is, let's not fist fight a ghost. Let's fight for the human mind and the human spirit. And if we focus on those things, those are the things that we as educators can uniquely do. Number three, let's find ways to use the tools constructively in course revision. So instead of trying to just catch students using it, let's find ways to incorporate it so that now it's not a surprise. And lastly, let's focus on how we're facilitating an education that humanizes the kind of organizational leaders and managers we hope to produce as graduates. How can we elicit empathy, creativity, thoughtfulness, problem solving, emotional intelligence through the assignments and discussions rather than just recitation of theories and practices? How can we ensure we're doing what machines can never do? And that's ultimately, I think, what my goal is as someone who cares deeply about the process of education in as much as the product. So with that said, let's go into some questions and answers.
I have two things. One, you really educated me today, and I thank you for that, Joshua. You gave me some good ideas about using it in the course, and right now I'm working on Business 661, leading organizational change, and we just had our kickoff meeting today for developing the course. And so I think I'm going to bring this into there, and I'm going to have the students critique the output that comes out of it in a discussion, so far as having a strategic plan developed using AI. And so that, I think that'll be kind of interesting. But
Mhm.
your one caller made me reflect back on a couple of weeks ago when you talked about it to us, to Jim and Connie and I. And so I thought I'd go ahead and sign up for it, and I did. And then I asked it to create wedding vows for my wife and I. And I told the thing that we were an interracial couple. And it actually did a really, really good job of creating vows for us, respecting each other's cultures and bringing those two cultures together. And, it was really interesting how it did that. And so.
Mhm.
Josh, why do
Yeah.
you think it doesn't have empathy? I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Well, understanding what's happening under the hood, I know technologically speaking what's actually happening, and it's just symbol processing in the end. And
But is that any different than what people do? I mean,
I
it just
I
seems
would
like the way it learns is the same way our students learn. They go out, they scour the internet, they find stuff, they repeat it
yeah
back.
yeah I it probably would open a whole new can of worms of discussing what differentiates human beings from machines, but I do have some strong convictions in that area that for me, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I've done coursework and I have an interest in things like the mind-body problem. And there's just too many mysteries, even in cognitive neuroscience, that we just don't understand yet. And so, even some of the algorithms in machine learning and artificial intelligence, we call them like neural networks, recursive neural networks, or recurring neural networks. And we say that they mimic the way that neurons work in brain anatomy, and that analogy is extraordinarily strained. One is a biochemical process, another is really purely comes down to binary bits, and so to me, there's just a big gulf between even the biology and what's happening in a machine.
We're not approaching singularity at any point in the near
I don't think
future.
so. No.
So great presentation, by the way, really good thinking, and thank you. How about proposing to UAGC that they give out 4.0 subscriptions to all the students? Is there a reason why we can't do that?
I mean, I don't know. It's about $20 a month, which is very reasonable.
Probably get a good deal on it, maybe.
Yeah. But I would encourage all of us to do it because I'll speak to this if I may. I didn't want to really open up this door, Andrew, but I will say it. I think the industry that's going to be most disrupted, and it pains me to say this because I've been in online education for the past 20 years. It's going to disrupt our industry first and maybe
Absolutely.
the most. It is only a matter of time. So right now, the OpenAI, I didn't even mention Google's Bard engine or what Microsoft is doing with their Bing chatbot, but just the OpenAI model has an API, an application programming interface, so that you can integrate the ChatGPT feature into other platforms. I promise you, it is only a matter of time until Canvas integrates automated replies to discussion posts. And it's going to generate AI replies. And if we don't figure out how to adapt as online educators, we'll be the first ones in the unemployment line because the technology is going to automate a lot of this.
Yeah, I've tried using it to just like
thanks.
South Park to try and respond, to grade discussion topics, and it does a good job. I mean,
It's impressive.
I jump in,
Well,
please.
I think we have a question up here.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's my point. You can write lectures, you can do responses to students. Say you have a large class, you can write those responses and tweak them. And they're very verifiable, especially when you're a long time in your field.
Yeah.
And it cuts down on time. I had read it in an article, so I tried it and I said, wow, this is not bad. So yes, we can be out of work.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to be on the cutting edge and show that we are embracing it and trying to utilize it for the benefit of the students that we serve, rather than being afraid of it and railing against it. I think that's the worst thing we can do.
Claude, you have a question?
Joshua, yes, Joshua, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. Maybe the first question is, moving ahead, what is going to be the university policy when students are using AI? And is it going to show in Turnitin 100% similarity score or something like that, and how we should act and react on it?
Well, UAGC did release a policy position on it and guidance for us. And honestly, I think it was pretty well formulated. I'm pleased with how UAGC has gotten in front of this effectively. But yes, I think, was it Connie maybe in the chat mentioned that Turnitin already has false positives. It's not foolproof, and it gets the similarity score wrong. And even though there's a high similarity score, if you go in and manually look at it, you can see that obviously the student did not plagiarize. The same will be true here with the AI detection. In fact, I think it's going to be worse in terms of false positives, because let me give you an example. So if you use Grammarly, or you encourage students to use Grammarly, some of the cadence of Grammarly, when it restructures a sentence or restructures paragraphs into especially sequential thoughts, so it will conclude a paragraph with finally, comma, and then give the last point. That cadence is very similar to what the language models are generating, because, well, Grammarly is a software algorithm driven language model. So is it fair to a student who used Grammarly to restructure their paper for better wording to get flagged for AI when maybe they didn't generate that using ChatGPT at all? So we have to be very, very discriminate in terms of those kinds of tools. And I don't know, I guess my view is that I look for ways to try to help the student learn from experiences like that, rather than just catch them in a punitive way. And I think we have to do the same thing with this.
Another thing, Josh, that they mentioned in our meeting was that the AI tool only looks at certain pieces because it doesn't recognize certain content. If it's just line after line of content, they look at that. Well, if they only look at 10% of the paper and 10% of the paper comes back 100%, the AI score is 100%. So you don't know what percent of the paper they've reviewed to determine the AI score. So right now, we've all kind of decided it's nice to look at, oh, we got a little AI score over here, but most of it really has no meaning until we can be confident that the vetting process of the review is in good order. And right now it's not.
And maybe those are some of the skills we have to get really good at as online educators, is learning to discriminate and to use those tools, but also to bring, I don't know, a level of discernment that only a human being can bring to that process of really determining now what is a human voice, just as we've done with plagiarism in the past. But it's a skill, and it will be a skill I think we have to hone.
Joshua, thank you for a great presentation. Do you think that maybe chat GPT could possibly be customized to maybe suit the needs of a particular online course or subject area?
Yes. In fact, the model, as I said, is really so simple that there's I think OpenAI itself is actually working on a product where specific industries can have their own, essentially their own server running that they train on their own data. But if you start using it and you leave, they call them conversations because it is a chat, it's a conversation with the model. And you leave your conversations running, you can actually tell it, I'm going to train you on such and such. I'm going to teach you about such and such. And it starts to train itself on that information. So you can leave that as a running conversation within your account. So it could be a specific subject area, Frank, could be a specific organization, it could be a specific industry. Here's what's really crazy, and I encourage you to try it. Take some of your own writing, paper an article, scholarly article that you wrote, even better, a couple of your own emails that you've written recently. Tell ChatGPT that you're going to train it on your writing style and start feeding it some things that you've written. And then in the future, you can say, can you please write such and such in my voice, in my writing style? And it will mimic your style rather than,
Oh my God.
yeah, it's really extraordinary.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yes, lots of room for customization.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was a great presentation.
Thank you, Frank.
You know, Josh, I was listening to someone make a presentation the other day and just talking about Chat GPT. And one of the concerns, of course, is in certain disciplines, surgery, medical science, being a pilot, those things. And I know they were theorizing, but it really got me thinking a little bit because, in talking about how it's going to impact online education in general, but it would be almost necessary for a person to actually be sitting across the table or face to face in some manner to be tested on their knowledge of a particular discipline that you would have to measure face to face. And strangely enough, the person obviously a little bit more dated than some of the people in this room, but he said, just imagine that maybe we'll end up going back to the days of the blue book, where you have to sit across the table and write your knowledge out in a blue book to actually measure your understanding of a particular topic. And the more I thought about it, I'm going, well, in some disciplines, in order to measure what they really know, because the fact that they generated it from AI is not going to help you if you're laying on the operating table with an AI trained surgeon. So it really created a lot of interesting thought in part of it too. And you mentioned it, and I'm really glad you brought it out too. And that is the thing that I think we're struggling with a bit is a lack of conscience, inability to think critically within the material and to try to evaluate the accuracy of it. And also the emotional intelligence, especially when we are deeply ingrained in culture of care and all those other things that we want to let our students know. It's not impossible, and I like the fact that you said, hey, let's don't get rid of it. Let's understand how to work with it and make it work for the benefit of everybody involved. But that's going to take a lot of work, I think, on our part.
Well, it's a tool. I mean, it's like it's not going to make dumb people smart, but it may make smart people smarter. Which I think is probably our goal in higher education.
That's a great way to put it, Andrew. Yeah, I agree with that.
Although it might make dumb people look smarter, but it won't necessarily make them be smarter.
I just remember being trained to use a slide rule, and I'm so glad I have that skill because I really put it to use.
Yes.
A what?
Slide rule. Yeah. So one of my hobbies is I collect and restore vintage computers. So I actually have machines back to actually some from few machines, uh, proto computers from even the 1950s. But I have a collection of slide rules too, and mechanical adding machines and things like that in my collection. And it's because it took that to get us to where we are today. I mean, without those machines, we wouldn't have smartphones, or the
Do you
benefit
have,
of doing
do you
all
have a
of this.
PDP-11?
Exactly. Yeah. I do have a PDP-11 actually. I have
That's what
a,
I learned on.
did you? Yeah. I actually have a
during this
replica.
series.
Yeah, it's a kit that I built, and it's the front panel of the PDP-11, and it actually runs on a Raspberry Pi, but it has the toggle switches and the panel of lights and so on and so forth. So
Binary.
yeah,
Yeah.
yep. So
Fun.
I wanted to mention something, respond to something Jim said. My wife Sarah was a critical care nurse, and she now teaches nursing for another large online institution. And I think about nursing as one of those fields where there's technical knowledge in nursing, surely technical competence, but it's only by being at the bedside does a nurse learn compassion and patient etiquette and those soft skills that only happen in the foxhole, so to speak. And so I think we have to think along those lines. We might not, in our department, Jim, we might not have pilots or surgeons, but these are people that are going to be running businesses, leading organizations, supervising people. And as all of us know, when you're in a position of leadership, you have the opportunity to do great good and to positively affect people's lives, or you have the potential to do great harm. And so it's those human aspects that I think we can really zero in on and say, what are the things that we can do beyond the technical knowledge, to make human beings who are socially responsible and who care about people in the end.
Well, in a strange sort of way, I think that your point is so well taken that it emphasizes even more the importance of emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
When you see the lack of it, you become more aware of the need of it, and maybe in a strange sort of way, AI is going to emphasize that even more so than it has
Mhm.
before.
Yeah, I agree, Jim.
Any more questions for Josh? I really appreciate all of you being here, and
Thank you.
just Josh, your work on this has been exceptional, and we can't thank you enough because you've given us this time, and we really appreciate it. And this is recorded, obviously, so it'll be available for use in the future. But thank you again, everyone, for being here, carving time out of your day. And again, thanks for your time, and anything else, let us know. Be more than happy to pass it along.